Picking up dead things is a shitty way to make money, but it's not like I had better options. I was out of jail, living at my cousin Grant's place, waiting for him to lose patience with my freeloading ways when he brought me news of the occupation. I had already half-heartedly applied at a couple of places, partly to stay in Grant's good graces, partly to satisfy the whims of my ignorant fucking probation officer, but every time I checked the box on the application that asks if you have ever committed a felony, I knew that was it. I wasn't getting any calls back from Steve's Taco Emporium and bait shop or whatever bullshit job I was applying at. Nobody was calling me at all. See, that's the thing. When they got 5 years of prison on you, they got you by the short hairs. You have to do whatever you can to get by. Grant really tried to sell me on the roadkill job. He was obsessed with me getting a paycheck. "Josh," he'd tell me, "the real advantage of picking up dead deer is nobody gives a fuck about your checkered legal past. All they care about is when you get the call. Do you drive out, pick up the dead deer, and then drop it off at the county spot? If you can do that, you get $40 a deer and you set your own hours. But you do have to pick up dead fucking animals, right? Like touch them." We were outside on his porch. It was Sunday, early spring. Grant didn't have work that day. He had graduated from freelance dead animal pickup to working a snow removal road maintenance gig with the county, which meant no weekends for him. Me. "This would be the kind of job you wear gloves," he told me. "I don't want to have a job where I'm wearing gloves, man." I opened another beer. "It's a way to get back on your feet," he said, politely ignoring the fact I wasn't really on my feet before I went in on a 5-year bid for manufacture sale of controlled substances. "You can borrow my old truck. If you work solid for a few months, maybe you can get your own apartment, or at least afford your own beer, which will be convenient, you know, since I'm about to throw your ass out if all you keep doing is drinking all day and eating my groceries." I waited for him to laugh, and when he didn't, I decided to ask him when I could start. The next few months went okay. Most days there was a deer dead somewhere, so most days I made at least $40. Usually, though, I picked up 2 or 3. I won't insult us both by doing the math. Suffice it to say, it usually paid for a case of domestic. There were, however, a couple of problems. Some were normal, logistical types of problems. Grant's truck wouldn't start. I didn't have enough money for gas. My probation officer was a fucking asshole, but some were a little weirder. The weirder one that kept happening was once or twice a month I'd get a call about a dead deer, but when I would show up there would be nothing there. The weirder part. It was always the same place, always the same time. Frost Road, right before it merges onto 74, always midday. At first I assumed I was wrong, got mixed up or something, but then it happened again and again. Dead deer. Vanished deer. There never was a deer. Maybe some of them were fresh kills and somebody else just picked it up. Free meat for a month. I don't judge. But it never really felt like that. Every time I would drive out there, it just seemed wrong. I'd get out and the air would smell strange, like a storm was coming but not a cloud in the sky. Pressure was all wrong. So that's why I was in no hurry when I got a text about a deer dead on 74. Zero rush, actually. I finished the beer I was working on at the Blind Pig. The owner/bartender, Steve, was both a barbecue fanatic and struggling with glaucoma, and moseyed on out to the parking lot. I was still driving Grant's truck and it was a real piece of shit. Just a terrible ride. Half the lights flashed on and off, seemingly at random on the dashboard, and the steering wheel shook if you took it over 40, but it was free, and it worked. Like me, I guess. I drove it out under blue skies and turned on the radio. It only got one station, the local AM gospel channel. I turned up As Long As I Got Jesus and sang along. 10 minutes later, I turned a corner, and where I thought there would be nothing, even though a dead deer got called on, lo and behold, there was a deer. I pulled over, threw my hazards on. They worked, but it was a slow blink, and mostly only on one side. Better than nothing. I got out of the truck and cracked my knuckles. It was a hot morning for that time of year. Early spring, dandelion seeds in the air, the woods all around starting to turn a bright green after winter. In this part of town, the woods on both sides of the road were huge. State land. It went on forever. If you got lost out there, you were done. Nobody ever finds anybody who goes missing in those woods. I put on my heavy work gloves and stepped out of the truck. Nobody else was on the road. At 10 a.m., everybody's either already gone to work or school, and nobody's going anywhere for lunch. The rest of the populace, I assumed, was starting to day drink. The emptiness gave me the jitters. I've been in some weird, bad, violent scenes in my life, but the thing that always creeps me out the most is when a place that should be crowded is empty. I took a deep breath and walked to the deer. I didn't want to see it. I hated seeing it. Dead deer suck. Even living in the middle of nowhere where you get used to seeing them on the roads, it's still gross and sad. In the summer they rot and burst in the sun, and in the winter they freeze on the dead grass of the median. The whole walk to the body I told myself the same thing I always told myself. I was doing a good thing. The right thing. Getting rid of this deer stops everyone from seeing it. Nobody wants to see it. Plus, getting paid, I thought. Gotta get paid. The deer looked fresh. The body was twisted. Blood splashed across its frame, its head at an incorrect angle. The smell of it hit me, and my stomach rose into my throat. I had to look away and gather myself. I bit the inside of my cheek, closed my eyes, and counted backwards from 10. When I said 0, I opened my eyes, and that's when I saw it. The deer was moving. No, not the deer. It was still unmoving, but its skin pulsed, like a wave was underneath it, trying to break out. I stepped backward and stared. Was that a twitch, I wondered? The body moves after death sometimes, doesn't it? I took a long look at the deer. Nothing, no movement at all. Just roadkill. Involuntary twitch, I decided, nothing else. I bent down and slid my shovel under it. It leapt. I screamed and dropped it back on the ground. I scrambled backward, only stopping when I hit the front of Grant's truck. My chest was heaving up and down, and my knees were weak, rubbery. The dead thing was frozen, slumped on the ground. I pulled out my phone and called Grant. "Josh, how you doing?" "What the fuck is wrong with this deer, man?" I came in real hot, screaming, starting at an 11 out of 10. "What are you talking about? How am I supposed to know what the fuck is wrong with a deer when I'm not there to see the fucking deer?" "It's moving, man." I was pacing around, giving it a wide berth. "It's moving." "Are you sure it's dead?" I stopped and let the phone down, stared at the body for a second, and then nodded, brought the phone back up. "Yeah, it's dead. Dead as hell. Do you think I'm an idiot? Usually dead things don't move." "I'll call you back on FaceTime. Show it to you." I called him back and flipped the screen to the corpse. "It's not moving," he said. "I know. Now it's not. But it moved when I picked it up. Put the phone down somewhere so I can watch your stupid ass pick it up again." I put the phone on the ground, propped up against a rock. The deer was where I had dropped it. I bent down, my heart thudding. The woods seemed to have gone silent, and the breeze had died. "Pick it up!" Grant shouted. "I'm about to," I yelled back. Deep breath. I touched the animal. I swear I felt the warmth of it through my thick-ass work gloves. I didn't move until Grant yelled again. I grunted and lifted it up. Deer weigh about 130 pounds. You have to support them somewhat against your body. I had this pile of bone and skin and fur in my arms, and Grant was shouting at me, and I was trying to not breathe. Deer guts and plasma getting on my shirt, my arms, and there was no movement. Just something dead, but there were flies all of a sudden. Way too many fucking flies that hadn't been there before, like an army of buzzing. But over them, I could hear Grant shouting, telling me nothing was wrong with the goddamn deer, and he had to go back to work. He was right. Nothing was wrong. Something had been, but not now. I threw the deer in the bed of the truck and drove off to the dump site. The usual place was pretty close, just a few miles out of town, but as I started the car up, I got a text. Said there was a new location for the dump site. The address it sent me was in a different direction, to the west. Out past the new target, where the new developments were, the subdivisions and fake-ass mansions, where everybody drove SUVs and all their kids bought drugs off dudes like me. This address was beyond that. The old woods, where nobody had ever built anything ever. All hills and trees and twisting roads. A driveway every 10 miles, with the houses invisible from the street. The GPS told me to turn up one of those dead-looking driveways and keep going. When I finally stopped, I was in front of an old cabin. It looked like nobody had used it in years. Mold was thick on the roof, and one of the windows was broken. In the backyard, I saw a rusted old pole with little strings tied around it. It looked abandoned like everything else there. I honked the horn and parked. I still wasn't okay from whatever happened, but I was trying to not think about it. A fire was burning in a pit behind the cabin. Somebody must be there at least. The smoke of it hit me when I stepped outside. Birds were screaming in the trees. "Hey, anybody here?" I shouted. "Got a deer for you guys." No response. I looked back to the back of the car. The deer was still there. I don't know where I thought it could have gone. The flies from before still seemed to be there, swarming all over. A thick cloud. They swarmed all over the truck, like a cloud. All I could hear was a low buzzing. Some hit my face. One got in my mouth and I spit it, disgusted. There were so many flies I couldn't see the deer for a second, which I guess explained what happened next. You know those photos that look one way, but if you put a transparent colored piece on top of it, it turns into another picture. It was like the flies were a paper on top of the deer. Before them, the deer was a dead doe. After the flies swarmed, the deer had horns and its eyes were wide open. Oh, the thing opened its mouth and its teeth weren't flat and round, the white tic-tacs of animals that don't eat meat. No, they were sharp and violent and ready to bite. I staggered back, closed my eyes. The buzzing was in my ears. I felt hairy, tiny insects all over me. I slapped blindly at flies and kept my mouth closed, even though I wanted to scream. Then the noise can I shed. I opened my eyes. The flies were gone. I stepped forward and looked into the cab. In there, the deer was dead again. Its horns were gone. Get in the truck, I thought. Get in the truck and drive the fuck away. Never come back. But first, throw the goddamn deer out. I reached in and grabbed the deer. Its skin was warm and soft. It moved under my hand. My stomach twitched, but I gritted my teeth. As soon as you get it out, then throw up, I told myself. Don't throw up in the middle. Makes things way too complicated. I pulled the deer to me, smelled its sick, sweet death cologne, lifted it and turned around. In front of me, 50 or 60 deer stood 20 feet away from me. Their eyes glowed in the noon light. Bright, weird eyes. Not the black I expected, but silver instead, like quarters had been polished and then been shoved in their eye sockets. Their brown bodies stood pressed against each other like they were a strange, living wall. I closed my eyes, but this time when I opened them back up, They were still there. They opened their mouths, and all I could see were razor-sharp points where their teeth should be. "Bring the body," a voice said. I looked, but I didn't see anyone. "Bring it to the fire!" The voice sounded strange, wrong. A recording slowed down. Someone who didn't speak English reading words they had never said. Maybe something that couldn't speak had said it. There was a space in between the deer, like a path almost. It led straight to the fire pit. I began to walk through. I felt their eyes on me. I heard them breathing. It didn't sound like I thought it would sound. The fire pit was surrounded by smooth white stones, which seemed to shimmer from the waves of heat. The closer I got, the hotter it was. Sweat soaked through my shirt. The weight of the deer pressed against me, and the heat of the pit and the heat of its body. Why was it hot, I thought? Isn't it dead? Was it? I swear I could feel it move. I felt sick again, waves of nausea, but I knew I couldn't stop. I had to do this. I lifted the deer over my head. All the sounds of the woods stopped. I threw it in. When the deer hit the fire, I heard them start to scream. I dropped to my knees and covered my ears, not moving, trying to not hear the awful screeching. It sounded like machines being run all wrong, like their engines had been disassembled and put back together backward, and then everything was turned up to high. Everything was high-pitched. And so painful. In the middle of all the noise, I heard my name. My eyes had been closed, but I opened them. I was staring right at the deer on the altar as the fire tore it apart. Its mouth was open, and I swear it was saying my name. Then the flames got worse, and the smell of burning skin and fur got too bad. I started to cough, and when I could see again, the flames were even higher, and the deer was only a skeleton. I turned around, and all the deer were gone. I staggered to the car and crawled into the seat. I kept squeezing the steering wheel and looking into the rearview mirror. Just smoke and woods. Trees fucking everywhere. I drove off, shaky at first, but I kept accelerating. I was 20 miles over the speed limit when I saw a sign for the liquor store. I hit the brakes and went in, got a bottle of their cheapest vodka, and started drinking before I even got back to Grant's place. The next day, hungover, I called the county and had them take me off the roadkill list. They said sure, but asked me why I hadn't taken the deer in yesterday. I told them I took it to the new site. I didn't say anything else about what had happened. My head was pounding, and my throat tasted like metal. I had dreams all night about things in the woods, houses on fire, dead things that weren't all the way dead. That's when they told me there was no new site. Same place as always. "Where did you take it, man?" they asked me. I hung up the phone, and in the static of the deadline, I swear I could hear the endless screaming of the deer. On Sundays, I used to go to church. Not just me, it was always the two of us. Nathan and I. It's still hard to think of myself in the singular. But back when we were still together, we would dress up and drive the half-hour to the closest one, greet fellow parishioners, pray and sing and listen to the sermon. Some days we'd leave after communion, but other times we'd stay, make small talk. It would always make me feel better. I don't go anymore. This Sunday, I woke up alone. The house seemed as quiet as it usually does. I walked downstairs and made coffee, asked Alexa to play the news. Alexa told me it was going to rain later, and they still hadn't found those kids that went missing a few days ago. Other than that, not much. I told Alexa to play John Fahey, and I drank coffee, and, even though it was a bad idea, I looked at old photos of Nathan on my phone. Nathan at the pool, smiling at the camera. Nathan at the zoo, pretending to be scared of the meerkats. Nathan, reading in our living room. Absorbed and unaware, I took a picture of him. When will you stop doing this, I think? I swipe another photo. Someday, I tell myself, just not right now. That was when I heard the noise from outside. It sounded loud, like thunder or a car crash. At first I thought it might have been a storm, but the sky was still cloudless. I walked over to the window and peered outside, in the backyard where I thought the noise had come from. I think I gasped. A deer hung, trapped on the top of my fence. It looked like it had tried to jump over it but hadn't made it, landing so the top of the metal had impaled it. But it was still alive. I turned away. I was still crying, from looking at the photos, but also from seeing that I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Part of me thought maybe the deer was some kind of nightmare, just one I was having while awake. Maybe if I don't look for a few moments it will be gone, I tell myself. I tried to reorganize the junk drawer, to empty the dishwasher, to wipe off the counters. Then I peered out the window again. Did I think it was going to have climbed off the fence? It was still there, somehow still alive. While I hadn't been watching it, had managed to move its head, and now the heavy antlered animal faced the house. I stared into those deep, dark eyes, and it felt like he was staring at me, that he knew I was there, that I could help him, but I wasn't. "I'm sorry," I said, inexplicably aloud, like it could hear me. He moved, opened his mouth and closed it. I went to my phone and dialed 911. "It's not an emergency," I said as they answered. "But there's a hurt animal." I explained what had happened. The 911 dispatcher, while sympathetic, explained there wasn't much they could do. She could send a state trooper, but it would take several hours. Did I have a gun, she wondered. It's legal to shoot a deer if it's suffering like that. It's legal to kill something if it's unhappy. Is that what Nathan thought? "Don't send the police," I told her. "I have a gun." I had never wanted a gun, but Nathan said it was a good idea. "We live in the country now, Jane. Middle of nowhere. What if something awful happens? It will keep us safe." I put it back there after the police returned it to me, a few weeks after they finished all their reports, a few weeks after they showed up at the door one morning and asked if I was Nathan's wife. Before I put the gun back in the nightstand, I thought about throwing it away, tossing it in the bottom of a river, burying it somewhere. But I finally decided to keep it. I'm not sure why. Maybe what Nathan said had made sense. We were in a remote place. Maybe I needed some kind of protection. Maybe I kept it for some other reason. Maybe I would need it if something awful happened. And now there I was, in my empty home, holding the still-loaded gun. Something awful had happened. I walked out of the bedroom and to the downstairs and then stopped right at the back door. The deer on the fence studied me. I opened the door and stepped out, my feet pressing down against the grass. The dying deer seemed to grow larger with every step I took toward him. He was much more massive than I imagined he'd be, and the tangled crown of his antlers looked less like a part of his body and more like strange bone flowers, fruit of an unknown tree. The grass was dry and the sun was behind the clouds. Shadows pooled across my backyard. Clouds spotted the blue sky with an awful blackness. Rain soon, just like Alexa said. The deer was breathing heavy, his dark, moist eyes locked in on my approach. Blood trickled from his side where the tips of the fence had pierced him. Was it dying? Was it still alive? I was dying too. We're all dying from the moment we're born. I was holding my phone, asking Google what I should do when the deer opened its mouth. Inside of his bright red mouth, all foamy with blood, a strange noise came, like wind but a storm in my head. When I was a little girl, maybe 8, maybe 9, I heard the voice of God. I was in church, and it must have been after Christmas. I remember because I was wearing my green and yellow striped sweater I'd gotten that year, which was a beloved item of clothing from my childhood. This was the point in my life where I was questioning the existence of the divine. It happens to all of us, that sudden twist of the knife in childhood when you look at the sky and just see clouds, no heaven at all. A friend's mother had just died, and the injustice of it all had stirred in me those desperate first questions that come out of the space where walls of faith crack. In the pews, listening to a sermon, I thought with anger, "God, are you up there?" Almost instantly, a voice boomed in my head. "Yes." I looked to my left and right. My mother and father flanked me on both sides. Neither gave any indication that had heard the voice. I craned my neck back and forth, but I saw no one anywhere who seemed to have received a holy message. Immediately I reached out again to the voice. "Are you God?" I thought, my tiny forehead wrinkled in furious thought. "Are you God? Tell me, tell me, tell me." Nothing but a resounding silence. I left the church that day, not necessarily a true believer, but very aware something extraordinary had happened to me. In later years, I wondered if I hadn't merely daydreamed the voice, a bored child in a hot building, but I never truly thought I had. The sheer bizarreness of the event was unshakable. The voice wasn't physical, in that I didn't hear it with my ears, but I heard it in my head. I had never felt that sensation before, and that feeling of it became an unending obsession of mine, chasing that voice, hunting down that alien experience. And now I was before it again. The deer bled on the fence. His chest rose up and down. His skin rippled, as if there was a breeze underneath the flesh, an invisible current I could not see. Its mouth moved, like it was trying to speak. I stepped forward, unable to stop myself. I touched the body. The fur was matted and sticky from the blood. Flies buzzed a complicated symphony around it. The deer turned his head, red leaking from his inhuman lips. The face was not just the face of the deer. There was another face swimming inside of it, and it sometimes rose to the surface of the skin and then drowned back into the fur. I knew the face. Nathan. "Jane," the thing with his face said. It spoke in my ears and in my head. It spoke with the body of the deer and the face of my dead husband, who killed himself months ago in the woods with the gun I was now holding, watching his features rise and melt into the face of a dead deer. I was going crazy. "Jane, I am so sorry. It's been so long," it said. "Nathan." I breathed. He jerked his head up and down. "Yes, yes, I've missed you so. That's why I came here, even though they didn't want me to. But I had to see you." His features disappeared and reappeared into and out of the deer as he spoke, sometimes human, sometimes animal, sometimes both. "Nathan," I repeated. I felt like I was dying, like maybe I had died, and this was hell, a place where everything familiar becomes strange, and all that you love is destroyed before you again and again. Is this really you? What happened to you? Who are they? It's me, Jane. I'm different now, but it's still me. I found them in the woods. He was breathing heavily. "I'm sorry. I should have told you," he said with difficulty, and then the skin trembled and his face melted into the face of the dying deer, who opened its mouth and began to scream. Have you ever heard a deer scream? The violent noises echoed across the lawn into my head, loud and terrible and strange. I dropped the gun and covered my ears, closed my eyes. When I opened them again, the deer was pulling itself off the fence. Its legs were too long. Wet, fleshy fingers were breaking out of the hooves. It lifted its back leg off and over the fence, threw its body to the ground. Its guts trailed afterward, like red wires from a brown stomach. It stood up on its hind legs, blood pumping all over its legs, its horns long and sharp, and it began to walk. I reached down for the gun. It slipped out of my hand. I scrambled backward, the shadow of the thing coming over me. The darkness of it seemed almost physical somehow, like it was touching me, its hot, wet, dying body covered with ticks and flies. It moved like a child learning to walk, each step hesitant, but unfolding according to an eternal, unknown rhythm. The jerkiness, the stop and start of its gait, became smoother every second. I scrambled backward, legs in a V shape, pushing with my feet, my elbows planted in the cold spring ground. Its eyes were the bright blue of Nathan's. I reached out blindly with my hand, fumbling until I felt the gun. I grabbed it and struggled up to my feet, looking away from the deer for a moment. When I stood up, the deer was gone and Nathan stood before me. Horns grew from his forehead. Blood poured down his face from the bony growths. Staring at him now, I thought of his body in the morgue, the cold room where I identified him, where I touched his bare shoulder, the hole in his head from the bullet. Here there were 2 holes for the antlers, but his face was whole and intact. It was him, or an almost perfect copy. "Jane," he said, "the dead can live again. There is an eternity." I stopped moving, and so did he. I pointed the gun at... Was it the deer? Nathan? Both? I wasn't sure. "Jane," he said. His bloody lips were Nathan's lips. I hadn't kissed him in 3 months and 2 weeks. "Please." "You aren't Nathan," I said. My voice shook. "You're a monster." "Come to me, Jane." He stepped forward, awful, jerking steps. "Come to the woods. We can live forever with them. We can live forever in them." The guns sounded like thunder. Black birds flew from trees, bright, moving shadows. I stood alone under dark, raw skies, the spatter of red from what was now only a dead deer on hard green grass before me. The rain began to fall, just like it was promised. I was thinking about killers when I got the text. "You up?" I sighed. "It's 3 in the afternoon, Daryl. I'm 100% up." "Cool, cool. Can you do me a favor?" Daryl was well, he would say he didn't know me, and I would say he was a closeted local I had hooked up with on Grindr, so neither of us had a great word to describe our relationship. Sometimes language lags behind the complexities of the modern world. "What do you need?" "Do you have any money I can borrow?" I leaned my head back and looked at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom above me. It was so familiar and so alien at once. A stain on the right corner from when the roof leaked. Thumbtacks that used to hold up an old poster of a shirtless Morrissey. An off-white overhead light fixture with a spiderweb crack. This was where I grew up, where I hadn't really been in the past 7 years since I went off to college, first in NYC, and then for a MFA in Chicago. I was 2 years into my program, and I had come home after my mom had a hip surgery. I figured I could stay a few months and get some work done on my thesis while helping her out. This thing with Daryl was just a way to kill time, although it sometimes seemed a little more complicated than time killing should be. "How much?" $450. His reply was instantaneous, no hesitation at all. "I can help you out," I texted back. "But what's going on?" 3 bubbles appeared in my text window. Disappeared, reappeared, disappeared again. I watched my phone for a response, then drifted back to my laptop. I had an article about human sacrifices and slasher films open on Gstore on one tab and a listicle entitled 6 Reasons Why You Should Rewatch Killer Camp on another when a message flared on my phone. "It's complicated." I ran a hand through my hair. Was it thinning, I thought. I tried to think of aging like Prufrock, even if the modern world thought of aging in terms of fillers and filters, and I looked out the window. The sun was shining, and the sky was an absent-minded blue. After nearly a decade living in cities with millions of people, it seemed insane how quiet everything was around me. Vast stretches of trees, no cars honking, no sirens, just distant houses and people with drug problems and no money. I don't want to help you with stuff you said you don't want to do anymore. I texted, obliquely but hopefully clearly to him. I always tried to be vague because I had a nagging suspicion my phone records regarding him might one day be subpoenaed. It isn't money for something I need. I owe some money. From a long time ago. Can you help? I didn't text anything back for a moment, and he was instantly typing again. Please, I seriously need help, man. I wanted to say no. Honestly, I did. I wanted to be a callous, indifferent dick. I've always envied those people whose hearts are cold and dead. For me, though, I can't be that. I always give to GoFundMes. I always believe people's sad stories. I always try to do the good thing. What's the saying again? No good deed goes unpunished. I can Venmo you, but you have to promise me you aren't using stuff. I put in an emoji of a needle and pill, but I deleted both and then hit send. No, not Venmo. Cash. Cash? What the fuck, like I have cash? Absolutely not. I hit send, then in less than a minute he responded in a rush of text. It has to be cash, and it has to be now. I'm at the Budget Inn on 30. I'm with the people I owe the money to, and they want it now, or... Little bubbles appear, disappear. Please help, Todd. Please bring the money. Room 13, Bugsty Inn, please. Budget Inn. I gotta go. The text stopped. I sat on my bed and stared out at my phone. Outside, there was the sound of nothingness. The Budget Inn was one of those hotels where you would never spend the night. In its defense, most of its clientele likely used it in duration of hours, not full evenings. Years ago, infamously, the local police raided a room there where it believed a subject of a warrant was staying. When they knocked down the door, the guy they were looking for wasn't there, but they did find someone smoking meth. So they went into the next room, and then the next room, and then the next room after that. In every single room they entered, somebody was smoking meth. It was that kind of place. I pulled into the parking lot, parked. There were only 2 minutes left of the podcast I was listening to, so I decided to finish. And that's the legacy of Killer Camp. Thanks for listening, even if it was a bumpy ride there. But what does Whiteface say in the movie? Dying to see you again, right? Love those 80s slasher one-liners. Why did those ever stop? Dad jokes embedded in the murder DNA. The patriarchal reminder of death and authority. But, hey, anyway, I want to credit my friend Todd again for that idea about slasher movies, about how they occupy the place in America that folk horror does in Britain. But here, we don't have the old ways like they do in Europe, their forgotten fertility gods who require sacrifice. What we have here are killing spirits who walk in the way of American violence, who protect our suburbs and defend virginity and the American dream time. Slashers enforce moral codes and attempt to hold the fabric of our disrupted society together. But the original sin of American genocide has corrupted them, creating these deformed monsters we forget are gods. Anyway, he's writing his thesis about that, so I hope I didn't ruin it for you, buddy. And please, come on when it's finished, and you're a genius professor somewhere talking about horror movies, and I'm still doing a podcast in my garage in Rhode Island. And that's all for me today, everybody. Send complaints to the show email and money to my Patreon because I need the money. Money, money, money. This is Vic, signing off from the 37.5 parallel. As the pod's exit music swelled, Street Halo by Burial, I messaged Vic that the show was great and I couldn't wait to come on and talk to him. Then I took a breath and texted Daryl I was there. I stepped out of the car. The motel looked wrong in the daylight, like it was a space only meant to be seen at night. Clouds above it threw shadows down across the cracked concrete. At the terminus of the parking lot, the woods swelled, dark and green and deep. The difference between a hotel and a motel is hotel doors open to a hallway. Motel doors open to the carnivorous world itself. There are less barriers. They are a weaker place, prone to death and madness. In hotels, ghosts haunt the rooms. In motels, you're always only one step away from becoming a ghost yourself. A sign said, rooms 1 to 10 were on the first floor, 11 to 20 on the second floor. I walked up the rickety staircase and went to the left. There it was, 2 doors down. I looked back at the parking lot, nearly empty. My car, one blue pickup truck with a dented fender, a black SUV in the corner, a white van with a ladder. A breeze rattled dead leaves across the vacant spaces. The dark sky looked like it could turn and start to rain. Daryl hadn't texted me back. I knocked on the door. "Who's there?" Someone who wasn't Daryl asked. "Is Daryl there?" "Who are you?" "My name's Todd. He said to meet him here." The door opened, and I stepped into the room. It was dark, all the curtains drawn. Bedsheets hung over the curtains. No lamps. Candles instead, dripping wax onto crappy tables and stained desktops. A movie played on a laptop left open in the corner. There were only 2 people in there, a man and a woman. Both weren't wearing much, the man in boxers and a white undershirt. The girl was in the bed in a tight pink shirt, with only a towel thrown hastily over her lap. And then there were the masks. Both wore deer heads. The man's had antlers, the woman's none. Their trembling eyes stared out at me through the cut-out holes where the eyes of the deer would go. There was the smell of crack cocaine in the air, overwhelming and omnipotent, like God must have been on the first day. "Thanks for coming," the man said in a deep and scratchy voice. "Where's Daryl?" "You're his friend. You don't look like his friends," said the girl on the bed. She had a laconic American nowhere accent. She sounded like malls and dying towns. "We aren't very close," I said. "She's right," said the man, his antlers tilted. "You really don't look it. He called me, asked me if I could help him out." "What is it you want, then?" The girl leaned back on the bed and ever so slightly opened her pale legs. "To help?" "He wanted some money." "Do you know him well?" The man had a familiar voice. I couldn't decide if I recognized it or just thought I recognized it. The motel room's air conditioner was running hard. I watched a sheet flicker. "I just met him," I said. "He's in the back room," said the man. "Go and talk to him. Don't let us get in your way. We'll stay busy, like we have been for hours." "Hours and hours and hours," laughed the girl. She stood up and walked closer to me. "Are you smiling under that mask?" I asked her. "What makes you so sure I'm wearing a mask?" The girl with the deer head stared at me. The air felt heavy. "Don't bother him," the man said, placing his thick hand on her frail shoulder. A silver ring with a brown strip in it caught the light. "I'll just be a minute," I said. "Ooh, take your time," he nodded, his great horns moving up and down. I walked toward the bathroom, my legs shaking. Behind me, I heard a lighter click and a telltale inhale. The bathroom was how I thought it would be. A cracked toilet and dirty mirror, water stains on the ceiling, Escalade keys on the sink. The mirror had scratches in it, but there was no Daryl. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes looked red and tired. I hadn't been sleeping well. The skin around my chin and neck was starting to go flabby and soft. I stared at myself and thought, this might be the last time I ever see me. I touched my reflection and immediately regretted it. The mirror surface felt greasy and wet. I took a breath and walked out of the bathroom. The two were both on the bed, leaning back against the headrest. The girl's shirt was gone. "Did you see Daryl?" Her voice was soft, inviting. "No," I said. Did they really think he was back there? Had he been? What the fuck was happening? "Did you want to look under the bed?" the girl asked. "You didn't check there." "I don't think he's under the bed." "Check under there," the man said. "Now." That's when I noticed the gun on the nightstand next to him. What choice did I have? I nodded and got down on the ground, and then I crawled under the bed. The carpet was filthy. Violent stains from strange old conflicts. Above me, the bed creaked. "Daryl told you to come here," the girl said. "He did." My voice was shaking. I'm going to die, I kept thinking. I'm going to die. I was just trying to help him out. I was staring at the wooden slat under the mattress. It vibrated from their movements. "Would you like to see me without my mask?" I didn't say anything. Then I hear a lighter, an inhale, a cough. "Maybe you can wear one too," the man said. Someone knocked on the door. "Please!" I shouted, hysterical. "Please don't kill me. I have the money." The bed shifted. Someone getting off. "We don't want money, Todd," the girl said. "We want something a little more complicated." I heard the door open. It was raining outside, and wind and rain were blowing inside, bringing in the smell of petrichor. "You're late," the man said, angry. Then, "Jesus Christ, what happened to you?" His voice was shaking. "In the woods, we will be one. In the fields, we will run. In the trees, we will see the faces of who we will be." I recognized the voice. Daryl. "What did they do to you?" the man said. I heard him backing up into the room. The door slammed shut. From above me on the bed, the girl was hyperventilating. I could see the man's feet under the bed, and then I could see Daryl's, but it couldn't be his feet. "What the fuck happened to you?" the man was asking. He sounded scared. Did the rest of Daryl look like his feet? I closed my eyes. The girl above me started saying, "Oh my God," over and over, like it was one word, and it went on forever. "Why they do that to you? We did what they asked us. They promised us something, Daryl. Where are they? I want my reward. I want my—" The man's response was cut short by a gasping noise. "Too!" The girl screamed, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," and I opened my eyes to see a spray of blood hit the carpet. "No, no, please no," the girl whimpered. I heard her scrambling above me. Someone else got on the bed. I could hear harsh, rasping breath. "Daryl, please. We can go to them. We can fix you. Daryl, I know where the door is. We can go together. Please, 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 God, please." A scream. A horrible, loud scream. It went into my spine and pulled at all of my nerve endings. And then the sound stopped. A loud thud next to me. A deer mask without horns landed on the filthy carpet. There were crimson streaks against the soft brown color of it. Something got off the bed. In the middle of my hysteria, I was starting to wonder if he was really even there, or if this was just something that sounded like Daryl. Looking at his feet, I couldn't imagine what he looked like. I didn't want to know. Something wet dripped on my face. I opened my eyes to see liquid dripping through the mattress. It touched my lip, and it tasted like copper, like metal. My hands were clenched. I couldn't breathe. This is how I die, I thought. All the ways you think it's going to happen. Car accident, cancer, drowning. This is it instead. The ending brought to you by inchoate madness. In spite of myself, I started to laugh. "Daryl, you asshole," I said. "I brought your money." He stopped moving, bent down. I shut up. I still couldn't see his face, just hear his breathing. "In the woods, we will be one. In the fields, we will run. In the trees, we will see the faces of who we will be," he whispered. I closed my eyes, said goodbye to me. Then there was the noise of him walking away, the door opening, and then nothing, only the rain outside and the howling winds. I stayed under the bed as long as I could. I was convinced he would be there when I got out. He wasn't. The two dead bodies were... The man's stomach cut open like a deer. The girl's neck cut so deep I could see the white spirals of her spine. I stood for a moment, paralyzed by the sight of them. The immensity of their death, of what just happened, the reminder that you are only on one side of this world, and there is a far more troubling, far darker land of which you know nothing. The dead man's blue eyes stared out from the eye holes of the deer mask, lifeless. They knew the answer to the question we all want to know. What's on the other side? They knew, and the way they looked made me hope I never found out. I took off my hoodie and wrapped it around my hand, grabbed the doorknob and opened it out into the weather. Rain was pounding down in sheer vertical sheets. The sky was black as rotten teeth. Lightning flares cut in occasionally like marbled fat in meat. I put my hoodie back on, pulled up the hood, looked both ways on the barren walkway. I didn't see any cameras anywhere. Maybe no one saw me come in, I thought. Maybe I should get the hell out before anyone comes to check on any noises. I ran to my car, the rain soaking me to the bone. When I got in, I locked all the doors, turned the ignition, and ran the defrost up to 4. I was sweating, still hysterical. In the hot car, I felt feverish, the fogged windows like a map of my frenzied brain. What was real? What had actually happened? I grabbed an old fast food napkin off the floor and wiped off the inside of my window. Condensation remained, ghost images of old finger marks against the windshield. As soon as the window cleared, I saw Daryl. He was standing at the edge of the woods. I watched him until the fog recolonized the window, completely obscuring him, or whatever was left of him. When I wiped the window again, there was nothing there. He was gone, and only the darkness of the ancient woods remained, waiting against the edge of the parking lot.